History is not just kings, wars, and dead guys in wigs making bad decisions. It is also people pulling stunts so stupid, so bold, and so wildly out of control that they sparked riots, wrecked reputations, started wars, and fooled entire nations. This is 33 pranks that got so out of hand. They changed history, and some of these make modern trolling look embarrassingly amateur. 1. On April 1, 1974, people in Sitka, Alaska, looked out and saw black smoke rising from Mount Edgecumbe, a volcano that had been sleeping so long nobody wanted it waking up before breakfast. The culprit was local legend Oliver "Porky" Bickar, who had dragged old tires into the crater, lit them, and painted giant letters in the snow spelling April Fool. The joke was so convincing that the Coast Guard sent a helicopter to investigate, because nothing says successful prank like federal aviation fuel. What makes this one beautiful is the scale. It was not a whoopee cushion. It was landscape-level trolling. And for one glorious morning, an entire Alaskan town thought nature itself had decided to join April Fool's Day. 2. Medieval Scandinavia looked at many bad political ideas and still somehow found room for one more. According to saga tradition, after King Eystein crushed a rebellious district, he offered the locals a choice for ruler: his slave or his dog, Sor. In a burst of pride so irrational it feels modern, they chose the dog. The legend says Sor was treated like royalty for 3 years, sat on a throne, had attendants, and even signed decrees with a paw mark. Then the canine monarchy ended in exactly the sort of way dog government ends: violent chaos. Whether every detail happened exactly like that is less important than the point of the story. It survived because it was the ultimate political humiliation. A conqueror saying, very clearly, your rebellion was so embarrassing I am replacing you with a Labrador. 3. In 1810, Theodore Hook made one of the most deranged bets in London history. He claimed he could turn an ordinary house into the most talked-about address in the city, then spent weeks sending fake letters, ordering deliveries and visits to 54 Berners Street. On the big day, chimney sweeps arrived first, then bakers, coffin makers, coal wagons, doctors, tradesmen, nobles, and eventually the Lord Mayor himself. It was less a prank than a handcrafted traffic apocalypse. Crowds jammed the street, business collapsed into chaos, and Hook watched from a house opposite like a man who had invented trolling before the internet. The joke mattered because it exposed how easy it was to weaponize trust, paperwork, and social status. London's elite all came running because a letter told them to. Bureaucracy got catfished. 4. Otto von Bismarck really did challenge Rudolf Virchow to a duel after a savage political clash, because 19th century statesmen apparently processed criticism by trying to schedule homicide. The famous twist is the later story that Virchow, a pathologist and public health giant, chose 2 identical pork sausages as weapons, one harmless and one infected with trichinae. Bismarck supposedly took one look at this nightmarish menu and backed out. Historians are confident the challenge happened, but the poisoned sausage detail is probably legend that grew afterward because it was simply too perfect to die. And honestly, of course it survived. A militaristic strongman being defeated by a scientist who turns a duel into a biology exam is not just funny. It is civilization in one scene, with science calmly asking politics if it would like to taste consequences. 5. In 1957, the BBC aired a dead-serious news segment showing Swiss farmers harvesting spaghetti from trees. Not pasta drying on racks, not noodles being made. Full agricultural spaghetti, hanging from branches like the world's most carbohydrate-rich orchard. Because spaghetti was still unfamiliar to many British viewers, the prank worked beautifully. Hundreds of people contacted the BBC asking how they could grow their own spaghetti tree at home. The corporation reportedly told them to place a sprig of spaghetti in tomato sauce and hope for the best, which is exactly the kind of public service broadcasting that deserves a medal. This hoax changed media history because it proved something painfully durable. If a trusted voice says nonsense in a calm tone over nice footage, large numbers of people will absolutely invite that nonsense into their kitchen. 6. Cambridge had rules. Lord Byron had hobbies. When the university banned dogs from student rooms, Byron did not respond like a normal person and get a quieter pet. He acquired a bear, a real one. Then, in classic Byron fashion, he leaned into the absurdity instead of hiding it, reportedly pointing out that the rules said nothing about bears. That is not just rule-breaking, that is legal comedy. Cambridge could police barking, but apparently had not thought to future-proof the regulations against one dramatic poet with too much confidence. The story mattered because Byron was already building his public identity as the glamorous rebel who treated institutions like stage props. The bear turned him from merely scandalous into legendary. Nothing says romantic genius quite like making a top university discover it had a dangerous loophole in the pet policy. 7. In 1906, an unemployed shoemaker named Wilhelm Voigt bought pieces of a Prussian captain's uniform from second-hand shops, put them on, and discovered the central weakness of authoritarian culture. People obey the outfit before they question the person. He casually ordered real soldiers to follow him, marched them to the town hall in Copenic, arrested the mayor and treasurer, and walked off with 4,002 marks from the city treasury. The soldiers complied because he looked official enough, which is hilarious until you realize entire states have nearly collapsed on the same principle. The prank became a national sensation because it exposed the cult of uniformed authority in Imperial Germany more effectively than any speech could. Voigt did not beat the system with violence. He beat it with tailoring. The costume was the key to the kingdom. 8. In 1726, Mary Toft convinced a shocking number of important men that she was giving birth to rabbits. Not metaphorically, not in some weird village rumor. Actual pieces of rabbit were being delivered, and prominent doctors, including men tied to the royal court, came to inspect the miracle. Some believed her. Others suspected fraud. The king even got involved through his surgeons, which is what happens when medicine collides with spectacle and leaves common sense in another county. Eventually, the hoax collapsed, Toft confessed, and the scandal trashed reputations across the medical world. That is why this prank mattered so much. It was not just grotesque comedy. It publicly humiliated elite science at a time when medicine desperately wanted respect. England watched its experts get outsmarted by a woman, some rabbit parts, and a total collapse of professional skepticism. 9. The famous story says the Dutch bought Manhattan for trinkets worth $24, as if early New York began with the world's smuggest yard sale. Modern historians, especially native-centered ones, are much less impressed with that old punchline. The exchange in 1626 did happen in some form, but native ideas of land use and diplomacy were not the same as Dutch private property law, and the people involved were not simply handing over the island forever in the neat European way the myth pretends. That is why this belongs here. The real prank may not be one tribe knowingly trolling colonists with fake ownership papers. It may be 4 centuries of Europeans repeating a self-congratulatory story that collapses the moment native perspectives are allowed into the room. Manhattan was not born from Dutch genius. It was born from misunderstanding dressed up as triumph. 10. In 1979, students at the University of Wisconsin pulled off an art prank so good it became local folklore. They built a replica of the Statue of Liberty on frozen Lake Mendota, in a way that made it look as if the statue had sunk, leaving only the head and torch above the ice. People woke up, saw Liberty apparently drowning in Wisconsin, and reacted exactly as you would expect when confronted with patriotic surrealism before coffee. The stunt came from the Pail and Shovel Party, a campus group that treated student government like an improv stage with a budget. It mattered because it turned a college prank into a civic tradition. Later versions kept returning, and the image became part of Madison's identity. That is elite prank design right there. Do one ridiculous thing so memorable the city adopts it as culture. 11. Voltaire did not just write sharp lines. He also spotted a sharp mathematical mistake in the French state lottery and milked it like a man who understood that philosophy is nicer when rent is covered. In 1729, the government created a system tied to state bonds where the jackpot could exceed the total cost of buying all the right tickets. Voltaire and the mathematician Charles-Marie de la Condamine formed a syndicate, bought strategically, and won repeatedly. It was legal, devastating, and very funny. Imagine inventing a national lottery so badly that the Enlightenment shows up with a spreadsheet and leaves with your money. This changed history because the winnings gave Voltaire financial independence, which gave him far more freedom to write, publish, provoke, and become Voltaire on full power, instead of Voltaire with budget constraints. Never underestimate the intellectual consequences of a stupid jackpot. 12. In 1874, the New York Herald published a front-page story claiming that dangerous animals had escaped from the Central Park menagerie and were mauling citizens across the city. Lions, tigers, bears, chaos, blood, all the ingredients of a perfect panic stew. The paper tucked the truth away at the very end. It was a hoax. By that point, many readers had already taken the bait, armed themselves, barricaded homes, or rushed around the city ready to shoot wildlife that did not exist. That is less journalism than a citywide stress test. The prank mattered because it showed how sensational media could manufacture fear on demand long before social media learned to scream in all caps. New York got a brutal lesson in headline power, and newspapers got proof that panic sells extremely well, especially when readers do not make it to the last paragraph. 13. The 1927 Liberian election was not content with ordinary corruption. It wanted performance art. Officially, President Charles D.B. King won about 229,000 votes in a country with only around 19,000 registered voters. That is not ballot stuffing. That is electoral fan fiction. The result became notorious enough to be labeled one of the most fraudulent elections ever, and it helped deepen international scrutiny of Liberia's government amid accusations involving forced labor. League of Nations investigators got dragged into the larger scandal, and the episode stained the country's political image for years. What makes it feel like a prank is the total absence of shame. Usually, a rigged election at least tries to wear a fake mustache. This one kicked the door open, screamed, "Math is optional," and expected the world to nod politely. Even by crooked politics standards, that is show-off behavior. 14. For years, crop circles were treated by believers as mysterious messages from the cosmos, weird atmospheric phenomena, or evidence that aliens had developed a very strong interest in British wheat. Then two men, Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, admitted that they had been making them with planks, rope, and simple tricks since the late 1970s. Better still, even after confessing, they demonstrated how it worked, and still plenty of people refused to let the spaceship go. That is when a prank becomes immortal. It no longer depends on the pranksters. It starts generating jobs, books, tours, documentaries, and entire ecosystems of belief. Crop circles mattered because the hoax did not kill the phenomenon. It industrialized it. Once the joke was public, copycats, artists, mystics, and opportunists all piled in. The prank became its own religion with better branding. 15. Henry VIII loved disguise, surprise appearances, and tournaments, because apparently being king was not enough attention. In 1536, during a joust, his horse came down on him and left him unconscious for roughly 2 hours. Historians do not all agree on exactly how much that single accident explains the monster he later became, but many take seriously the idea that traumatic brain injury, chronic pain, and worsening health helped darken his personality. So no, it is too simple to say one prankish taste for theatrical risk instantly turned him into a wife-executing tyrant. But it is not simple to ignore the timing either. The point is brutal. A king who loved spectacle nearly got flattened by his own spectacle, and England may have spent years dealing with the political fallout of one very bad day in armor. That is court entertainment with consequences. 16. The Cobra effect is one of those stories so famous that economists use it as shorthand, even though historians warn the original Delhi tale may be more anecdote than perfectly documented event. The classic version says British officials offered bounties for dead cobras, expecting fewer snakes, and people responded by breeding cobras for profit. Then, the government canceled the scheme, breeders released the now worthless snakes, and the problem got worse. Whether every detail happened exactly like that or not, the reason the story stuck is obvious. It is the purest possible bureaucratic self-own. Reward people for solving a problem, and they may become entrepreneurs of the problem instead. That idea mattered far beyond colonial India. It became a permanent warning label for policy design, the moment helpful incentive turned into, "Congratulations, you have invented a snake startup." 17. George P. Berdell may be the most successful non-existent student in American history. In 1927, a Georgia Tech student accidentally received 2 registration forms and used the extra one to enroll a fictional classmate named George P. Berdell. Then he did the coursework for both identities. Berdell got degrees, stayed on the rolls, served in World War II lore, and became such a beloved campus phantom that Georgia Tech still treats him like a weird immortal alumnus who will never fully graduate. This mattered because the prank stopped being a prank and became institutional mythology. Berdell was not just a joke on professors. He evolved into an unofficial mascot for student cleverness, hacker culture, and anti-bureaucratic mischief. Very few made-up people outlive their creators. Berdell did, because once a fake student enters the system, the funniest thing possible is refusing to let him ever leave. 18. The Ems Dispatch is what happens when a statesman edits like a troll with geopolitical ambitions. In 1870, after a polite encounter between the Prussian king and the French ambassador, Otto von Bismarck trimmed the official telegram before publication, so it sounded much sharper, colder, and more insulting than the full exchange had been. Same event, fewer words, dramatically more rage. France took the bait, outrage exploded, and the road to the Franco-Prussian War opened wide. This is one of history's cleanest examples of tone-causing catastrophe. Bismarck did not forge a meeting or invent a message from scratch. He simply edited for maximum offense, like the deadliest copy editor who ever lived. The result helped bring on a war that transformed Europe and advanced German unification. One diplomatic text got snipped, and suddenly the continent was on fire. That is not spin. That is weaponized punctuation. 19. Spring-heeled Jack burst into London legend in the late 1830s as a clawed, leaping, fire-spitting menace who terrorized people in the dark. The details got wilder with every retelling, which is usually how you know Panic has started writing fan fiction. Some contemporaries suspected a group of bored aristocrats playing monstrous practical jokes, and rumor long pointed toward the notoriously reckless Marquis of Waterford. Was it definitely him? No. Was the theory believable enough to survive? Absolutely, because he already had the reputation of a rich menace who treated civilization like a pub game. What changed history here was not one confirmed attacker, but the chain reaction. A prank, rumor, or series of assaults snowballed into a full urban legend with astonishing longevity. London basically invented a Victorian cryptid, because somebody apparently thought terrifying strangers was quality nightlife. 20. The name America may owe part of its success to a publishing frenzy around letters attributed to Amerigo Vespucci, including one sensational account that many modern historians believe was forged or heavily manipulated. Those letters made Vespucci famous across Europe as the man who understood the newly found lands were not Asia, but a new world. In 1507, Martin Waldseemüller printed the name America on his map in that spirit. Later, even he seems to have had doubts. Slight problem, though. Once a continent has been branded, rebranding becomes awkward. So this is one of history's great publicity accidents. A possibly doctored travel narrative helps create a celebrity explorer. A mapmaker buys the story, and suddenly school children for centuries are stuck with the result. Half the planet may carry the naming legacy of Renaissance hype, questionable authorship, and wildly effective early modern PR. 21. Orson Welles' 1938 radio version of The War of the Worlds did not send the entire United States into a cartoon-level stampede, despite the legend. But it absolutely did scare some listeners, confuse others, flood authorities with calls, and create headlines so dramatic that the event became a permanent case study in media panic. The genius of the broadcast was its format. It sounded like live breaking news interruptions, which meant anyone tuning in at the wrong moment got gifted a front-row seat to fictional Martians ruining New Jersey. The scale of the panic was later exaggerated, but the cultural effect was still massive. Broadcasters, regulators, journalists, and audiences all got a sharp reminder that realistic media can hijack trust at terrifying speed. It was not nationwide hysteria. It was something more durable. Proof that simulation can outrun common sense when the timing is perfect. 22. Gregor MacGregor looked at ordinary fraud and decided it lacked imagination. So he invented an entire country called Poai, claimed he was its ruler, sold land and bonds to eager British investors, and convinced settlers to sail across the Atlantic to a paradise that did not exist. What they found instead was jungle, disease, and catastrophe. More than 150 people died, investors were wrecked, and the scam became one of the most astonishing financial hoaxes ever pulled. This mattered because it exposed just how easy it was to sell imperial fantasy to people already desperate to believe in easy wealth overseas. MacGregor did not merely fake paperwork, he faked national destiny. And because the early 19th century loved maps, titles, and colonial dreams, enough people accepted the lie to make it deadly. He essentially turned speculative finance into cosplay and got people killed with the costume. 23. In 1910, Horace de Vere Cole and friends, including a young Virginia Woolf, darkened their faces, put on robes and fake beards, posed as Abyssinian royalty, and tricked the Royal Navy into giving them an official tour of HMS Dreadnought, Britain's pride and symbol of naval power. The crew saluted, the hosts performed, and the pranksters struggled not to laugh themselves into exposure. They reportedly kept exclaiming nonsense phrases in fake admiration, because apparently the Empire's most powerful battleship could be breached with makeup and confidence. The hoax mattered because it publicly embarrassed the Navy at a moment when image and prestige mattered enormously. It also turned Wolfe's circle into instant scandal material. This was not just upper-class mischief. It was a live demonstration that ceremony, uniforms, and imperial seriousness can be turned inside out by a well-dressed joke. 24. Piltdown Man was the scientific catfish of the century. In 1912, a skull fragment and an ape-like jaw turned up in England and were hailed by many as the long-sought missing link, which was especially flattering because, surprise, it seemed to place a glorious stage of human evolution in Britain. National ego was having a wonderful time. For decades, textbooks and lectures treated the specimen seriously. Then better science caught up. The teeth had been filed, the bones stained, and the whole thing exposed as an artful fake combining human and orangutan remains. This mattered hugely because Piltdown did not just embarrass a few experts. It distorted research, skewed debates about human evolution, and showed how easily prestige, patriotism, and wishful thinking can make clever people hug nonsense for 40 years. Science eventually corrected itself, but first it had to survive one very smug fossil prank. 25. In the early 16th century, astrologers warned that a major planetary conjunction in Pisces meant catastrophic floods were coming in 1524. Europe panicked, pamphlets multiplied, and Londoners in particular started acting like the Thames was about to audition for the apocalypse. Many people fled to higher ground, stockpiled supplies, or made elaborate survival plans. Then the big day arrived, and the heavens delivered basically a wet shrug. No world-ending deluge, no cosmic revenge, just a humiliating amount of overreaction. This mattered because the failed prophecy became one of the era's biggest public lessons in mass fear, print culture, and the limits of astrology's authority. A bad prediction had spread like a medieval viral post. And when it failed, it did not just leave embarrassed believers. It weakened faith in the experts who had shouted disaster with such magnificent confidence. Apocalypse forecasting took a reputational hit. 26. The Cardiff Giant began because George Hull wanted to win an argument about biblical giants, and like a completely normal person, decided the best way was to commission a 10-foot stone petrified man, bury it, and then dramatically discover it in New York in 1869. Crowds flocked in, tickets sold, experts argued, and America fell in love with one giant slab of geological nonsense. P.T. Barnum even got involved with a copy, because naturally one fake giant was not enough for the 19th century. The hoax mattered because it showed how perfectly religion, show business, media hype, and pseudoscience could feed each other. The Cardiff Giant did not just fool people, it became an industry. It helped teach America that spectacle beats scrutiny when the story is juicy enough. Also, it confirmed an eternal truth. If you bury a lie carefully enough, someone will happily build a ticket booth over it. 27. Albrecht Dürer's rhinoceros is one of the greatest seen-it-in-a-text message illustrations ever made. In 1515, a real rhinoceros arrived in Europe, but Durer never saw it himself. Working from descriptions and a sketch by someone else, he produced a famous image that gave the animal armor plates, a bizarre extra horn, and the general vibe of a war machine built by a blacksmith who had heard of biology only in passing. The wild part is not that he got it wrong. The wild part is that Europe kept believing it. His image shaped how rhinos were imagined for more than 2 centuries and lingered in educational culture much longer. That matters because it shows how a compelling visual can outrun reality for generations. One inaccurate woodcut basically became official rhino propaganda, proving that confidence in illustration can be stronger than actually meeting the animal. 28. The Rosicrucian manifestos appeared in the early 17th century, announcing a secret brotherhood of enlightened sages with hidden wisdom, grand reform plans, and irresistible mysterious energy. Europe lost its mind. Scholars, mystics, seekers, and opportunists all started reacting to a society that may never have existed in the way the texts described. Johann Valentin Andreae was later linked to the material, and he called one related work a ludibrium, basically a lampoon or game, which is history's polite way of saying, you all may have been taking this way too seriously. That is why the episode matters. Even if the original project contained satire, allegory, or intellectual play, the response was real. The hoax, half-hoax, or meta-joke helped intensify Europe's appetite for hidden orders, esoteric networks, and secret knowledge culture. Nothing creates a secret society faster than telling people one already exists. 29. In 1762, London became obsessed with the Cock Lane ghost, a supposed spirit that communicated through scratching and knocking sounds in a rented house. Crowds jammed the street, seances were held, and the story spiraled into accusations that a man had poisoned his lover. The haunting drew in serious public attention, including Samuel Johnson and other investigators, because apparently even the Enlightenment could be dragged by spooky tapping. The punchline was painfully unglamorous. The source turned out to be an 11-year-old girl, Elizabeth Parsons, producing the sounds under pressure from adults with grudges and motives. That mattered because the case became a spectacular collision of superstition, publicity, religion, and legal drama in one very cramped address. London did not just get fooled by a ghost. It got trapped in a social media pylon before social media existed, with scratching instead of hashtags. 30. The Travels of Sir John Mandeville was one of the medieval world's biggest travel bestsellers, packed with marvels, monstrous races, dog-headed people, and enough impossible geography to make a compass resign. There was just one small issue. Sir John Mandeville was not a reliable traveler describing what he had actually seen. The book was a glorious patchwork of borrowed material, fantasy, and invented authority. Yet people treated it seriously for generations. That is where the prank stops being cute and starts mattering. The book helped shape how Europeans imagined the wider world, and Christopher Columbus himself was influenced by it when he planned westward travel. Think about that. One of the most consequential voyages in history was mentally furnished in part by a medieval guy whose travel writing had the factual stability of a tavern story told after midnight. Fake travel content helped aim real ships. 31. The Cottingley Fairies were created by 2 girls with cardboard cutouts, hat pins, a camera, and the dangerous knowledge that adults desperately want magic to be real. In 1917, Elsie Wright and Frances Griffiths staged photographs showing fairies dancing around them. The images later reached Arthur Conan Doyle, who was already deep into spiritualism and embraced them with the enthusiasm of a man who had somehow made Sherlock Holmes and still got out-detected by children. Doyle published the images and helped turn them into a major cultural sensation. This mattered because the hoax revealed a weird fault line in modernity. Photography looked scientific. Fairy belief felt ancient. Put them together and suddenly smart people started making terrible decisions with full sincerity. The girls had not just fooled relatives, they had baited the machinery of credibility itself, and it lunged. 32. California owes part of its naming history to fiction, which feels deeply on brand. A Spanish romance described an island called California, rich with gold and ruled by Amazon-like women. Explorers and map-makers loved the idea so much that the name stuck to real lands on the far side of the Atlantic. And for a long stretch, many maps even showed California as an island detached from the mainland. That mistake lasted for generations because once a gorgeous error gets into cartography, it reproduces like a confident rumor in nice ink. The episode mattered because it shows that exploration did not just map reality. It also imported fantasy directly into geography. A novelist tossed a glittering invention into the cultural bloodstream. Conquistadors took the bait, and 200 years of maps spent time drawing North America incorrectly. Literature did that. Not geology. Literature. 33. The Glozal affair exploded in France after artifacts turned up in 1924 that seemed to point to an astonishingly ancient European civilization with strange inscriptions and sensational implications. Archaeologists fought, newspapers feasted, experts accused each other of fraud, and the whole thing turned into a national intellectual cage match. The problem is that later study wrecked the fantasy. Research eventually showed the grand prehistoric civilization claim did not hold up, and that many of the most exciting objects were forged or altered, though the full mix of genuine, tampered, and fake material remained complicated. That nuance is almost too sane for the story because what people wanted was a lost civilization and a winner. What history got instead was a lesson in how badly experts can split when scandal, ego, nationalism, and media frenzy attach themselves to a shovel. Archaeology briefly became a soap opera with tablets. So after all that chaos, here is the real question. Which prankster on this list did the most damage to history with the least effort? And what massive historical prank or hoax did we totally fail to include? Not your favorite, the one that was the most dangerously effective. Drop it in the comments and make your case properly, because I know people are going to disagree hard on this one. And if you want more history that proves the past was completely unhinged, hit like, subscribe, and stay here.